You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London, bringing you a Russian perspective on our two countries and the world. I'm Daniel Sinner. Konstantin, a new novel by Tom Buller, tells the story of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, the founding father of the Soviet space program. Konstantin grew up in a poor family in the Russian provinces and was deafened as a child due to scarlet fever. But despite this inauspicious start, he became a pioneer in space science. His inventions included the first theoretically soundproof form of space travel, pressurized space suits, and space stations. We invited Tom Buller into our studio, where Alice Lanyardo started by asking what first got him interested in this scientific genius.
The first account of his life that I read was in a book by William E. Burroughs, and oddly enough, I discovered as I did more research that this, although it's quite a respected book, the account that he gives is very much the myth of his life rather than the reality of his life. He says, for example, that Tsiolkovsky was tutored by Mendeleev in Moscow. This is total nonsense. Tsiolkovsky, as you know, having read the book, lived in a corner of a laundry and was pretty much entirely self-taught. But there is a myth that has grown up around Tsiolkovsky. The story of his life seems to lend itself to myth-making. And actually it was the story of his life, this sort of mythologized version of his life that came to fascinate me sort of even more than the reality in the end. Because there are such things as his father, for example, was a Polish forester. And when you start from the point of view of a character who is dreaming of the stars, who's dreaming of rising, literally and metaphorically rising above the natural world, the fact that his father should be a forester, that sort of archetype of folk tales, it all plays together into the central, most fascinating aspect of the book and of that time, as far as I'm concerned, which is the fact that you are dealing simultaneously with the deepest past and with dreams of the very deepest future, and that these two things converge in mid-late 19th century Russia in a way that I really don't think that they have at any other time in history, as far as I can tell.
It struck me that Konstantin managed to get where he did despite extremely heavy odds. He was deaf for a start, and because he couldn't hear well at school, he didn't do so well in lessons and in exams. Other deaf children in Russia might have been written off, and some still are today. Do you think his parents were key in saving him from being written off, as well as his strength of character?
His mother, I think, felt personally responsible for the fact that she had lost her hearing and refused to believe that there was nothing that could be done about it.
Perhaps we should just remind listeners how Konstantin lost his hearing in the first place.
Well, Konstantin lost his hearing as a result of scarlet fever at the age of 10. He didn't lose his hearing completely, but he lost his hearing sufficiently to, as you say, not be able to study at school, and for all practical purposes, had he not been such an extraordinary single-minded character, I don't think that there would have been any hope for him really beyond some sort of, job in the petty bourgeoisie. The love of his mother, I think, was something that sustained him for a while, but I think that really it was his own resourcefulness and his own singularness which I found so inspiring, but I can't really say that it was his parents that pulled him through.
And it sounded like he just had heaps of natural enthusiasm and drive.
Enormous amount of natural enthusiasm and drive. It was such a joy writing, inhabiting him, if you see what I mean, during the whole research period, but during the sort of 2 years or so that it actually took me to write the book. Because nothing seemed to daunt him, nothing seemed to stop him, everything seemed to confirm his quest to transcend. The more horrible his life was, the more keenly, the more violently even he felt that he had to leave the planet to kickstart this future.
The book is written so beautifully. The opening line is one that I read and reread. You describe Konstantin as a small boy as he hurries down a riverbank, fine and light in his heavy sheepskin coat, as a sparrow in its winter plumage. Does writing come easily to you?
It did on that occasion. It doesn't normally. I think you sort of have to arrange things, and by that I mean do the research, know the world, put yourself in the right place, and at that point you have to throw yourself into its hands, if you see what I mean. Although many parts of the book I wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote, that first line was the first line that I wrote, and it gave me confidence from that very first line in the rest of the book, because there is as I think you're alluding to, there are many different sort of significances to that, and particularly to his mother referred to him as Little Bird. It's an idea that I always loved, that he was this creature capable of flight at all points, right from the start, capable of flight. And also the image of it, that sort of fluffed up image that you can imagine of a sparrow. I think that entirely hitted it. He's a tiny, skinny, little, energetic boy, and he's smothered in his great big sheepskin coat. It worked. It really worked right from the start. And so that came easily, yeah.
You've also recreated 19th century Moscow so well. I could smell the city on every page. How did you get a feel for this Moscow that hasn't existed now for so long?
I couldn't say that my experiences of wandering around Moscow have really informed it at all. I think it came much more from the idea of Moscow at that time as being an enormous village. And if you take a village and there's simply no end to it. And so you have your cows and you have your, the total sort of lack of sanitation. But up against this, you have this colossal wealth, and also it's in the same way it's the dawning of this technological age. And so at one point he sees a house with electricity for the first time, and this is against people who are living in squalor in wooden huts.
So did you read a lot of novels about Moscow at that time?
I think I've read everything that I was able to find that related to Moscow at that time. I mean, there are all sorts of bits of the book that I could point to and say, this bit came from here and this bit came from there. And I think that's probably true of most books, to be honest. I mean, writing, in a way, at least the information of it is a collage, really. Innumerable books. I can't even tell you how many books I must have read about it.
Is there a danger to doing too much research?
Well, yeah, I think more a danger to your own mental health than anything else. I decided finally that I would have to sit down and start writing this book when I read and carefully noted a piece by a guy called N.A. Reinen in a 1930s space journal about Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and his life. And I wrote it, I noted it, and I put my notes neatly in my file, only to discover that I had read this journal and noted it 7 years previously. At that point I thought, okay, I think I've probably done enough now. I've now got to bite the bullet.
Still, you first thought of the idea for the book when you were only 24. Not everyone at that age is even confident enough to think about writing a novel, especially one like this.
I don't think there was any confidence involved, to be honest, not to contradict you, but I don't think there was any confidence involved. It was a simple instinct. I saw this, in point of fact, quite mundanely, it was a vodka bottle in the shape of a rocket. And for some reason, I thought, I have something to write about Russia and space, and I have no idea what. It was a completely instinctive thing. And the confidence to write something really didn't come to me until 2008, I suppose, 2009.
So you did quite a lot of research, but actually it took you quite a while to start the actual writing. Was that because starting writing can be quite a brave act?
There is definitely a sense of taking the plunge. One thing about research is that you are doing something that's worthwhile and helps you in the direction of doing the book, but you aren't actually committing yourself to anything. You're not actually putting down a line and saying, okay, is this actually any good or not? But it's so much pleasure. It's so much pleasure. I tell you what, it is exactly like diving into cold water. Yeah, I love swimming in the river and swimming in the sea, but every time that I do it when it's cold, you always think, oh, why am I doing this? And you dive in and you go, oh, this is wonderful. And then you realise that you hesitate for a while on the bank, don't you?
That was Tom Buller talking to Alice Lanyardo. You've been listening to The Voice of Russia in the heart of London. From me, Daniel Sinner, and the rest of the team in London, goodbye.